right, so as many of you guys know, this is Dan Dix of Press for Truth. He does incredible work. I'm honored to call him a friend, and I hope to get out and see him again soon in Vancouver. We were just at Anarchapulco. We had a great conference, and you know, Dan does incredible work, especially when we're talking about freedom of speech in Canada. He's been doing incredible work on that end of the political spectrum, and I'd like Dan to kind of just go into all the problems that we face today with freedom of speech in Canada and some of the solutions. So Dan, I'll let you
I'm assuming you guys can hear me okay, so I'll just keep going. Thank you for that, Josh. Yes, there is a huge issue right now in Canada in regards to our free speech and the direction that it is going. I think it's safe to say right now that it's almost impossible to be critical right now of anything that these cultural Marxists under the Trudeau liberals, any kind of their ideologies, you know, if we become critical of that these days, it seems that we're potentially going to be put in jail. I didn't think it could get that crazy here in Canada, but a few years ago, this started to reveal itself in the Canadian court systems. I'm not sure how many of you might be familiar with the case of Gregory Allen Elliott. He was this guy who took it to himself to criticize some of what the feminazis, as we call them, were doing on Twitter. And just to give you a bit of context into this important story, because this really is this is the thing that kicked it off here. These feminazis were upset with a video game that somebody had created online, where they made it so that somebody could punch feminists in the face in a video game. Now, these feminazis took it to Twitter to essentially put a witch hunt on this guy, to seek the internet on him. And Gregory Allen Elliott simply chimed in and said, hey, isn't what these feminist girls are doing worse than what the guy did creating this video game? And because of that simple tweet, Gregory Allen Elliott was arrested, he was detained, he was charged, and he was put through a show trial, really, here in the kangaroo courts that lasted years. And this man's livelihood was put in jeopardy because he was not allowed to go online. He had an online gag order, but he makes his business online. That's how he makes a living. So essentially, they ruined this man's life, and this was dragged through the courts for a number of years, and thankfully, it did eventually come through that the courts agreed not to charge Gregory Allen Elliott, and thank God, because that could have really been a precedent-setting case had he had been charged for simply, again, just being critical of what some of these people had to say over Twitter. I mean, it's mind-boggling that we're getting to the point that, you know, these feminazis feel in fear of their life about a physical threat, but we're talking about language over Twitter. Now, when you think that that can't get any worse, I mean, okay, this is on social media, but what are we seeing in the universities and in the colleges where all of this stuff is brewing? Well, I'm sure a lot of you guys are familiar with Professor Jordan Peterson, who ran into the very serious now, politically incorrect terms of not referring to people as their preferred pronouns. Now, what this deals with, folks, is this idea that if somebody wants to identify themselves as a different gender than the one that they were born with, then they want you to have to be able to recognize their preferred pronouns. Otherwise, it could constitute hate speech. And Jordan Peterson, rightly so, pointed out the ridiculousness of this, policing our language. And he said, no, I'm not going to bow down to you and use your pronouns. And for that, the man has essentially had his life ruined. They've removed his scholarly funding and made it very difficult for him because he spoke out against this. And we need people like Jordan Peterson to say how ridiculous this is, because it continues to get even more ridiculous. Now, it's gotten to the point where we have things like Bill 89 now, guys. This is now trying to write it into law to have children's sexual identity, that we would have to recognize the pronouns of a child should they, choose to identify as a different gender? What is it coming down to here, folks? If we can't even suggest something suggest that a child is out of line, and for the kangaroo courts in Canada to potentially clamp down on us and say, no, that's violating hate speech. This just goes to show how far we've really come with this cultural Marxist indoctrination of the universities, and we're seeing it now. The scary thing about what we're witnessing today is the very fact that these college kids, these kids who are in these universities, who are pumping out this ideology, they're going to be tomorrow's judges. They're going to be the ones who are deciding the fate of the next generation. And until we can steer this ideology away from this safe space mentality, okay, and that might be difficult because these kids are heavily indoctrinated with the need for a safe space. We need to move away from this PC, politically correct culture, at any odds. I mean, as you've seen with Gregory Allen Elliott, as you've seen with Jordan Peterson, as you've seen with Lauren Southern and many other people who are voicing their concerns about this. I mean, take, for example, what Lauren Southern went and did. When she legally made herself a man, that was obviously to prove a point that she's obviously not a man. But when you look at her and she says, I'm a man, you have to recognize me as such. And if you do not call her he or him, you could potentially get in trouble. She's pointing out just how absurd and insane this really is, and how we've gotten to this point. So I think today, guys, what we need to do is work towards it's got to be a changing of the very ideologies, the opinions of the masses here. We need to step backwards, really. And the way to do that is to, for me, universities and colleges these days have been the breeding grounds for this. So it's that classic, get them while they're young. They're trying to influence the youth, and we need to do so as well. And that's why I've been targeting some of my video content towards these very specific issues, because it's leading towards an all-out destruction of our freedom of speech here in Canada. And it's getting to the point where guys like myself, guys like Josh, are finding it difficult to even present this kind of information on our very own YouTube channels. I'm sure you guys know we've been heavily demonetized lately, and it's not all about the money. It's a little bit about trying to silence this particular opinion so that the leftist cultural Marxist ideology is the one that gets promoted and pushed online through the schools, through YouTube, through general pop culture. But really, all we can do is lead by example, essentially, and continue to just try to explain the utter nonsense of how this is a slippery slope, and these are incremental steps that are leading us towards all-out tyranny in Canada. Canadians generally would not go for these types of things, like Bill 89, C-16, M-103. I mean, we're now to the point where discussing Islamophobia, which is a really nonsensical term. It makes no sense. Because a phobia implies that you have some sort of an irrational fear of something, and there is nothing irrational about questioning this ideology, which is at a direct odds with Western Christian standards here. So we are to the point now where even being critical of a religion and an ideology that is potentially making its way to Canada could land you in jail. If this motion eventually passes into becoming an eventual bill and passes into becoming an eventual law, this is possible. These things are on the table. And again, these are incremental steps. A few years ago, Canadians wouldn't have gone for that. They would have said, no, hell no, this doesn't make sense. This goes against my ability to be able to speak freely. But because of the conditioning, because of some of the false flags that have been set up in order to push this idea of Islamophobia being a problem, it's a sign of the times that it's really getting to the point where you're not going to be able to criticize. We're barely going to be able to walk outside the street and be critical of the grass on our front lawn without the Gestapo kicking down our front door and arresting us. So unless we point out these incremental problems as they continue to happen, people are not going to notice just how bad this is getting. And that's what's happening right now, guys. It's a snowball effect, and it's that classic, people are going to wake up and it's going to be too far gone to do anything by that point, unless we continue to point out the incremental steps that these guys are working so hard to squash our freedoms here. I hear people online talking about how they feel more free in America. And that's hard for a Canadian to take. That a lot of Americans say, you know what, we feel like we have more freedoms to say what we want here in America than you guys do in Canada. And that's starting to become the truth, and that's sad. That's something we need to completely turn around and get back on track. So, if you have any questions, I wanted to. We got 5 more minutes. All right. Well.
Yeah, I just wanted to mention, as you're talking about the freedom of speech in Canada, how important it is to mention how this has kind of incrementally happened with things like National Socialism, not Nazism. You talk about something that someone disagrees with, and isn't it so easy to just call them a National Socialist, a Nazi? Isn't it so easy to call them a skinhead? Say you don't want an incredible encroachment on the freedom of speech, like Bill C-13, Bill 89, M-103, which is developing past a motion. Isn't it insane that you can't even criticize someone that you disagree with without getting that thrown on you? And doesn't this kind of lead into this kind of mindset that we have to only stay in an echo chamber, stay with the propaganda that we're fed on a daily basis, and we're not allowed to question anything anymore? That's why these things pass so uncontroversially today, while they wouldn't have a couple years ago, don't you think?
Yeah, precisely. That's by design too, Josh. This is being done by design over again a period of a number of decades, really. I think this is trackable back to, again, the universities and the colleges is where the breeding ground for this is. Today's kids that are coming out of school completely up to neck in debt and going out into the world, and the first thing they have to worry about is figuring out how to pay back their hundreds of thousands of dollars that they've been put in debt to. And for what? For indoctrination to silence the voices of regular average Canadian citizens who just want to speak freely about issues that are concerning to them. So, perhaps it's time that we maybe reevaluate what we're doing here in the universities and the schools. And I think it's always a good thing to go there. That used to be a pretty big part of my activism when I lived in Toronto. We would sometimes go down to Ryerson University, or we go down to U of T. We'd walk around on campus handing out DVDs and flyers, and it's a great place to do streeter interviews. And a lot of these people are on the fence, if you will. They're going into this with an open mind, and they're being indoctrinated with the wrong message. So again, these are the judges and the lawyers and the police of the future. So unless we can try to steer this ideology into a place that's going to be more inclusive, more openly free of everyone's opinions, I fear just how bad it's going to get. So on that note, I'll take any questions as to how you think we can achieve this, because again, I think solutions are what we need to focus on at this point. We can talk about how bad it's getting all day long, but we need to focus on how we're going to turn this around. But on that note, feel free to shoot out your questions on anything in regards to what you want to know about what we do here at Press for Truth.
Excellent. We got a question from Randy Penner. Can you come up here, Randy?
Hi, Dan. We keep hearing terms like social engineering, psychological warfare, MK Ultra mind control, and that's all on the side of bad. Are there any professionals in the fields that I've just mentioned that know how to kind of do it on the side of good?
Yeah, me and Josh, we're professional propagandists. What we produce is propaganda. We are countering the propaganda with our own propaganda. That's hard for some people to understand. The word itself has gained a rather negative connotation over time. But that is essentially what Josh and I do. We've become experts at propaganda, but it's the good kind. It's the kind that people need to hear. It's the kind that's going to directly go against the propaganda we're getting from the mainstream media. So in a nutshell, you got to remember propaganda is not necessarily a bad word. Over time, it did get that negative connotation, but essentially, yes. Those of us who are involved in this currently, I would say, are doing that. We are socially engineering society into our particular bias. I mean, sure, every journalist is going to have a bias. Okay, it's impossible to not be biased. You're going to want to push your point of view, and I suppose that's what Josh and I do in the good sense of the term, in the positive social engineering, the correct style of propaganda that seeks to enlighten humanity rather than to just close them in.
Absolutely. Well, I think it's unfortunate inevitability that, as a matter of fact, propaganda works. That's just the fact. Propaganda works. That's why they've been able to get away with so much over time. Whatever part of the establishment you might talk about, it always works. And it would be crazy from our perspective when we're spreading the truth to not use those tactics, those same tactics, in order to educate people, because otherwise we're just going to be in our own little echo chamber, and we won't be able to reach the people that we really want to reach. We can talk all day in an echo chamber, but in the end, you got to get it outside of that echo chamber so people can, produce more ideas and pass it on, like a domino effect, really.
I think what the gentleman here was talking about was linguistic. Like a linguistic kind of professors that know which words are key or whatever to, I don't know how you deal with that. How do you touch anything, like you say, that isn't already got a label on it?
Emotional language.
Because...
what he's kind of saying is, how do we get around the fact that we have these labels? And how do we get around the fact that it's already kind of, I guess you could say, the waters are muddied when it comes to talking about the kind of propaganda that we produce versus the kind of propaganda that they produce, and obviously things like being called a Nazi for having a different opinion and stuff along those lines.
I suppose you have to just continue to lead by example, and not really be concerned with that, and hopefully that will change as you continue to lead by example and do it in a proper, just, moral way. If Josh and I present this kind of information in a way that's going to be palatable to the masses, great. But if we sink to the level of using propaganda to the sense of subliminal messages or any kind of crazy tactics that these people actually employ, then we're no better than the evil we're trying to fight. So I wouldn't worry really about the labels or how to affect that. Really, you just got to lead by example and continue to plug away and do your thing. And hopefully, as a result of that, people will start to understand which is the good stuff and which is the bad.
Absolutely, and we have time for one more question. Dr. Ryan Greshuk, can you come up here to give us your question? Excellent. We got ourselves a doctor on board.
Hi, Dan. Hi. Quick question. So, you guys are obviously doing this very well at a high level, and it's not always easy, say, for someone that isn't as, say, gifted with, being able to explain things or use that eloquence, say, without stepping on some of those, like verbal, like the verbal minefield and things like that. So, like, if we're going to pour resources in, kind of almost like a George Soros kind of approach, where you're funding the people that are doing, good work, right, effective work, who can we support? Who should we be following? Who should we be donating money to? Who should we be volunteering time for? things like that, so that we can basically feed the people that are doing that effectively?
Yeah, great question. Essentially, it really boils down to you. You know, you personally, who you feel is actively making change for the better in the world, and you know, it's going to be different for everyone. For you, that may be a certain niche or a certain particular group of journalists or activists online. For others, it may be others. You know, I personally have my favorites out there. You know, I've got people I tune into all the time and support. You know, even donate to, and they're in the field that I'm in. You know, some might even say we're in competition with each other, but none of us see it like that. You know, we all kind of work together. So if you're appreciating Josh's work, by all means, that's a great place to do it. If you're appreciating my work, by all means, a great place to do it. But there's room for lots of people to play, and you know, hopefully you'll discover somebody out there who you're just like, yes, you know what, that kid, that guy, that girl deserves a chance. You know, they're well spoken, they're trying, you know, they're banging it out there. I'm going to support that guy. That's what happened to me over time. You know, my success is largely to do with good people of the internet coming through over the years and saying, hey, Dan, I found your work. I support you. I want to help you financially. And I've had a lot of great support like that over the years. And it's only because of guys like you who have decided to say, you know what, here's how I'm going to contribute to this movement by giving these guys who have already found the way, they already have the technology, they already have the know-how, they already have the speaking ability. Let me contribute by funding them. That's a great way to get involved in the movement, by supporting the people who are already doing it. And again, just look for those guys who you are personally affected by and maybe inspired you. And I would just support those channels.
Absolutely. And we're running out of time to continue this, but I do want to just mention, Ryan mentioned who are those people, and I think you and I have very similar tastes when it comes to that kind of stuff, like James Corbett. I know you love James Corbett. I love James Corbett's work. He's very concise with his message and knows how to put that message forward, and he does incredible work digging into stuff. I think Dan will say you should donate to me. I think I'll say you should donate to Dan. I think that's kind of how it goes with independent media, is because we as independent media aren't in competition. We all have a message that we want to go get out. Many will say, well, that doesn't make sense. You're a capitalist. Absolutely, but there's room for morals in capitalism if you as an individual are a good person. You can support people who are doing great work and do the same thing as them. You know, you don't have to be out to drive them out of the industry. You can just be in it for that message and be passionate about it. And I think that's what Dan and I both are. I think over time you get to see different people's messages change or stay the same. It depends. Some people get watered down over time and don't follow that message that, you know, I think a few of us can think of a few names. I'm not going to mention anyone in particular today, but there's a few people over time that their message gets watered down and they become less of an asset to that movement by starting to fall for that propaganda of the other side, of starting to propagate these myths that we are trying to educate people against. And like I said, I won't mention any names, but your guess is probably as good as mine. But when it comes to great medias, there's Press for Truth, there's We Are Change, there's James Corbett. Lauren Southern's doing great work. If you agree with her message or not, she is an incredibly resilient person. She's 21 years old, and she's going around the world now. She just got independent from Rebel Media. She's doing incredible work, and she's traveling all over spreading information. Whether you don't like that or not, there's room for objective thought, because universities and colleges don't have objective thought anymore. You can't question things anymore. You have one line, and that's how it goes. You don't have a choice around that. And what the medias are providing today are kind of an alternative to university, without the debt, without the, you know, having to depend on your parents to pay for you for 20 years, pay off your debts. Instead, you can go on YouTube and find people that are passionate, that are putting out the information for free, and play them against each other. The guy on the left, the guy on the right, the guy outside of the spectrum. You can play them against each other and decide what you whatever you decide without being propagated by the bad side and the evil that we see coming from the George Soros faction, coming from News Corp, Turner, from all these guys that are controlling the big news stations, which I believe, what was it, 12 stations or something, or 12 companies own all the media in the world or something like that?
Yeah, I think we're almost down to 5 or 6 at this point. That's how bad this has gotten, to where it's moving into fewer and fewer hands, you know, of control at the top, in that pyramidal structure type of a structure. More and more of this is leading, exactly as you said, to the top.
Well, I thank you again, Dan, for talking with us. We've run out of time, but thanks again, and you do incredible work. I hope everyone that hasn't heard of Dan, if you haven't, to check out Press for Truth. He does incredible work, and he's being demonetized like crazy, so he has a Patreon that people can pledge to as well, just like myself. It's really important in these days for individuals to power the media, because they won't allow ad revenue anymore on most critical content. So thanks again, Dan, for talking with us, and we'll talk to you soon.